when the engine is cold, it turns over forever and doesn't catch up. It does catch up eventually and starts, but it takes forever. So at this point, I need to figure out what is going on and what causes that really difficult start. I guess let's get some tools and start looking around. The next thing to do is to see what is happening with the fuel. Here I have a fuel pump relay that I pulled out and sort of running a jumper. So this hose is connected to the output of the fuel filter. So I'm using this jumper in place of the relay. So in this way I'm operating the fuel pump manually. So I basically just close the contacts and I hear and I can hear the fuel pump run, and it's very loud and fuel flow is pretty good. So this fuel pump outputs a really good amount of fuel. It just flows. Of course I cannot measure the pressure. Judging by the amount of fuel this pump pushes out, I would say that it's working really well. So I'm getting a good spark as far as I can tell. There is a good amount of fuel the pump provides. So by this point I've verified that there is a spark when the engine cranks, and the fuel pump is pumping out a good amount of fuel, and there is no delay in between the pump turn on point and the fuel flow. So now I'm thinking that I need to remove the throttle body, take it apart, clean it up, see if I can figure anything out. So the next day, or the next day, or the next day. So up to this point I've done a whole bunch of checking on this engine, including spark plugs, ignition coils, camshaft position sensor, crankshaft position sensor, and what else I don't remember. I cleaned the throttle body. I checked all of the EGR, which threw a code, probably still does, waiting on parts. So I had to go through this service manual just to get some rough ideas. I checked the throttle position sensor, which checked out good. And here's something I discovered. The idle control valve, which I cleaned and installed back after removal for the cleaning. I got to a page in the service manual that tells you to measure the resistance. So you measure resistance between the center pin on the connector to the other two on the edge. I forgot what the manual says, but it's like kilo ohms. What I have is completely open to this one and about 61 kilo ohm to the other one. And like I said, it has to measure like 2 or 3 kilo ohms. I forgot what it says. So this open, I'm assuming one coil, so it's totally open. The other one is 61.3 kilo ohm, which is quite a lot. As of right now, I have a suspicion that this valve is really dead and non-functional, and that may be the reason why this engine doesn't start properly when it's cold. So maybe this problem is that simple. Maybe it's just the dead idle control valve. I discovered a few other things. Here's the connector for the crankshaft position sensor, and its resistance is a little bit out of range. Here's another interesting thing I discovered. So there's this 2-wire green connector that connects to a I'm assuming some kind of a temperature sensor, since it's sitting directly in one of the coolant pipes. So it seems that this locking tab is broken. The plug stays in place, so I don't know if it's a real problem or just a minor inconvenience. So I hope that this dead valve fixes the problem, and I really don't have to dig around anymore. So the next day of my adventure trying to figure out this hard cold start problem, after checking all the fun things and replacing the idle control valve, which was dead, this car still has a problem with the cold start. The next thing on the list was the coolant temperature sensor, which is located right here. This green plug. So we have our multimeter here. We have our repair manual. This little picture here shows how to check the sensor. Has resistance versus temperature. At this temperature of our coolant, the resistance is supposed to be somewhat below 1000 ohms. So what I need to do now is check the resistance of this sensor. Since the plug is unplugged, I can get to the terminals, of course dropping my multimeter all the way through the exhaust. So let's see what this sensor measures. That's about 250 ohms. According to the service manual, that resistance translates into a temperature that is about close to 100 degrees C, which is about 210 F, which is extremely unnatural for a cold engine to have. On my way home, I stopped by a parts store and spent some dollars on a sensor, and it shows 2.2, so about 2200 ohms. According to the picture in the manual, that's roughly 70, 75 F, 20, 25-ish C. So these two things are measuring exactly different. So according to my measurements, this sensor has approximately correct value of resistance at the current temperature. So that sensor seems to be defective. This thing here is 19. So hopefully I don't lose too much coolant. Well, there isn't much coming out actually. I don't know, hard to tell. So the sensor sits right in the middle of a flow of the coolant. I was just checking if anything is in there blocking the flow. There is nothing inside that may block the flow. Make this slightly tight. So now I have to plug the plug. Alright. And I guess this is the moment. Our engine is cold. So this is a cold start situation, as cold as it can be. And let's see. So it really seems like we resolved the situation. Let's try it again. there it is. I guess I have some good news for the owner of the car. So the engine warms up, the RPMs are going down. I think we have an improvement in our situation.